When do I know that I am addicted to something? Now, we're not talking about generalized things here, right? When we talk about the topic of addiction, the very first thing we need to ask is this damaging me, right? Is the negative far outweighing the positive? When we actually consider, am I addicted to something? Am I an addict? We need to consider, does this thing have control over me? Right, and how we go about of answering that question is by asking, can I voluntarily stop, right? Or start to at least control. Ultimately, we really want to ask, can I stop? When I was an alcoholic, I tried this numerous times because it causes such damage. I really tried for on and off, a couple of days here and a couple of weeks there. But it would cause such dysregulation, right, in my nervous system when I actually stopped drinking, that the state of actually withdrawal that I went into caused so much more pain for me, right, and the state of constant anxiety that it felt like nearly impossible. It was nearly impossible. Now, eventually, this is actually how I stopped drinking. I decided to completely stop. I went cold turkey. And in retrospect, if you are struggling with alcohol, all right, do not do that. Okay? And the AA is wonderful. I joined them. I was with them in their meetings, not their programs, for a while. And the emotional support that they offer can be very helpful. So I cannot reiterate and emphasize this clear enough. If you are struggling with any form of addiction, do not just stop. And one of the side effects of this is your body becomes dependent on whatever it is that you're addicted to. And the main thing there is, if you just all of a sudden stop, it's going to have certain consequences. Your kidneys and your liver, they're used to filtering certain things. They've become used to working a certain way, processing a certain way. If you just stop and go cold turkey, this can have detrimental side effects. So I do not suggest it. But coming back to the point then, how do I know I'm an addict? How do I know someone else is close to me? The very first thing is, can I stop voluntarily? All right, can this person stop voluntarily? If you have a conversation with them, how do they react? Do they become very defensive? Do they become very argumentative? Do they deny having a problem? These are all basically key signs that, yes, somebody does have a problem with any kind of substance, right? The second and more profound, perhaps, question that we ask, is this behavior damaging either you personally and the people around you? Is this having an impact on your personal relationships? Is this having an impact on your work life? Is this having an impact on your healthy activities? You might have been someone who loved training, and then you start drinking, smoking, consuming certain kinds of material over the internet, and it's basically taken over a part of not only your physical health, but your mental health as well, which means it would have started to influence and affect all of the things that you used to do. Let's call them healthy behaviors. So in essence, there's very much, these two key factors. Can I stop voluntarily? And is it impacting myself negatively and the people around me? The key factors. That's it. Now, just before I move on to the next point, once again, if you are struggling with any form of addiction, okay, there are support services around for that. Depending on where on the planet you're located, really the only thing you need to do, and I say it like it's such an easy thing to do, okay, but it's not. I fucking waited for years before I sent that email to the AA, say that I need help. So this is not an easy thing to do. Okay, I apologize for just letting it flow so simply out of me. This is a horribly hard thing to do. To admit that you have a problem and then to actively go and seek help for it as well. It takes enormous bravery, right? So I commend you, okay, and I do understand. But what I want to say is, if this is a place where you are, make an appointment with your local GP. Maybe go into the accidents and emergency in your local hospital. Talk to someone, irrespective of what the actual substance is that you're abusing. Talk to someone. This is the very first part of addiction. How do I know that I have a problem, basically? In essence, it causes harm. Straightforward, like that. Physical, emotional, relationship, interpersonal, causes harm. What is addiction actually? Now, in order to understand what it is, we also have to talk about where it comes from. In its essence, if you think about your nervous system as a home, all right? Your nervous system is inside this protective shell, your body, that works a very specific way. Your mind's then on the other side. Your brain, this organ up here. This is the translator for everything that we perceive via our senses, as well as everything that our body tells us. I mean, with the contemporary research, we actually know that nearly 80% of all the information that we perceive as human beings actually come from the neck down. It comes from our body. It doesn't come just primarily from our external senses. So our bodies talk to us constantly. And the happiness state of our life really depends on whether we have learned to listen to our bodies or whether we're still ignoring the information our bodies are giving us and we're still living just cognitively. Because if we live cognitively, majority of the time, we are living in a memory. We're accessing our memory. Research shows that more than 95% of everything we think every single day, of about 60,000 thoughts, consciously and subconsciously, every 24 hours, we have already repeated the day before and the day before and the day before and the day before. Being aware of where we actually get the information from can be an incredibly powerful tool. Taking into consideration that our bodies are our homes, our place of safety and security, that very first place that has the ability to make us feel safe and secure. If something happens that this body doesn't feel safe anymore, what is going to happen? This is where addiction can come from. It's called trauma, but in effect what it is a very high intensity stimulus that gets projected from an external environment towards the body. Our nervous system goes into this, remember, the shock, because it feels absolutely everything. We are a network of electrochemical impulses inside of us. So internally, we feel absolutely everything. If the intensity of this experience is too high, our minds cannot process. By process, it means comprehend, explain, and clearly understand cognitively what is happening. So in other words, we can't make sense of this high impact intensity experience that just happened to us. I see this so much, right? Not just in original kind of trauma behavior conditioning through childhood and adolescence and young adulthood, but adults that experience high impact events like car accidents, loss, grief, big relationship for long-term relationships that break up. All of these things can have a similar impact on our nervous system. The message is clear. You are not safe, right? This thing that's supposed to keep you safe is making you feel terror and fear, and you just want to run away, right? You need to get away from this. So this is the place where addiction actually comes from. It's an adaptive behavior that we go through our life and we look for something where, what can I find that makes me feel better? Like what I said, right, in the previous videos. I stopped in a liquor store and I bought a bottle of wine, and that was it. From one moment to the next, I felt calm. So even though I wasn't looking for it consciously, my body was literally open for whatever I come across that makes it experience relaxation and calmness. And this is where the shit starts. It's important to note that I'm not talking about addictions from childhood adolescence. I'm talking about addictions that primarily starts either in late teenage, young adulthood, or I was 27 when I really started going for it with alcohol, So that's not really that young anymore as an adult. So your body is not safe, okay? And if your body is not safe, it's going to be on the lookout for things that make it feel safe, right? So it can either be a substance, it can be food, it can be relationships, right? This is where toxic relationships come from. This is the essence of it, all right? This is where it comes from, right? Something happens and we can't deal with it cognitively. We don't feel safe at all. Then the part what it is really we come across something that is an adaptive behavior that we use that helps us experience temporary, and this is really important, right? It's like a one-off fix that has to be repeated. It helps us experience temporary relaxation and safety and security. It can also sometimes dissociate us completely from our nervous system. But in its essence, this is what it is and where it comes from. Going forward, I'll be talking about this a lot more, okay? Because this is really, it's trauma related. Trauma experiences, these are the underlying conditions that cause addiction, in my experience. The next part is, we need to talk then about like what different kinds of addictions there are as well. So, the obvious really for me in my personal life is alcohol. My grandmother, she was an alcoholic on my mother's side. She drank for 47 years. 47 now. Vodka was her poison. And she passed away more than a decade ago now. But she gave up alcohol for, I think, the last 7 years of her life, if I recall correct. But this is inevitably what actually killed her as well. Even though she did give up, enough damage had been done already. My father was an alcoholic. I briefly addressed this previously. He also gave up alcohol, even though he gave it up, like he was still traumatized. So the trauma still came out in different ways and forms. And then me, right? I was an alcoholic as well. Even if you go to Google, right, and you type in what are the most common forms of addiction, it is always something that we either put into our nose or we put it into our mouth. These are the most obvious ones. Or we put it into our veins directly. Or with pornography, we put it through our eyes into our minds. Right? But there's also a different kind of addiction that is much less visible to perception. And this is toxic attention addiction, right? Toxic relationships. If a person has a very specific kind of relationship with either one of their primary caregivers, their parents mainly, during childhood, right? And if that is a toxic relationship, depending on what attachment style they have to that, this child is going to learn that, yes, my dad was an asshole, and this means basically, from a subconscious point of view, every time someone is an asshole to me, oh yeah, but that was my dad, and his dad's job is to care for me, so obviously he showed me that he cared for me through being an asshole, hence toxic relationships, right? That's it. If my mother ignored me, right, and she rejected me and constantly told me that everything I was doing wrong, and now I'm an adult and I meet a husband or a wife or a girl or a boy, or today it's much more, how can I say, lateral, right, than just the normal binary genders. But I meet somebody who in effect then they ignore me, right? They stonewall me. They don't give me emotional affection and care. They reject me. What am I going to do? I'm going to be attracted to that automatically, right? Because this addiction had been developed a long, long time in my life. This is what I need to be okay. So it comes down to the same thing. My body, my home, my first home, does not feel safe. Did you know that, according to statistics from the World Health Organization, the average man, right, I'm not sure the stats for the females, but the average man waits for 10 years before they even mention to a mental health professional or just a medical professional, their GP, as an example, that they're struggling with depression. Okay, so how is this 10 years? How is it for the people around them, number one? And how is it for themselves internally, right? And that's depression. So think for yourself then, what about addiction? I haven't looked at the stats, right? And I will going forward to be better prepared. But once again, I can look into my own personal experience. And I mean, I was addicted for 10 years. And the only reason that I eventually ended drinking is because I was hurting other people so much that the suffering I was causing other people started to outweigh this fear I had of change completely. And this is the point where you will find yourself at, right? Either if this is something you're struggling with, or if you are a collateral part of this process. If you're a family member or in a relationship or a good friend. Sometimes the addiction makes us completely blind and oblivious. And then we have to come to this point where we go, what's heaviest? Right? What's heaviest? The pain caused by staying the same, or the fear of changing, finally, right? And it's usually, once that pain of the damage that has been caused starts to outweigh the fear of change, and this is the catalyst. That's the sign that, yes, okay, I've had enough. Right, had enough. Now, this is only if you push it to its ends. Obviously, you don't have to wait until that happens. In retrospect, in my life, God, I would have done so many things different. But in my shoes, obviously, if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. So I stopped drinking in 2017, and I haven't had anything to drink again. And I can pretty confidently say that unless I'm tortured, right, waterboarded with whiskey, I won't drink again. It's just not good for me, and it's caused an enormous amount of damage in my life. Damage that I am still repairing, and damage that I believe I will probably continue to repair for the rest of my life. And that's okay. That's okay. Sometimes the damage we cause other people, it's our fault. Okay, we are the cause of that. A part of the recovery is acknowledging that and taking the accountability. No, I'm not sitting here and saying that this is an easy thing. Actually, it's not. Okay, it's fucking tremendously hard. And that's an understatement. That's an understatement. But it is very necessary to, once we've gone through recovery and, then just because we stopped doesn't mean everything is hunky-dory now. We still need to deal with everything that happened while we were in that state. And this is perhaps sometimes why some people relapse. Because having to deal with all the damage that we caused, especially towards the people that we care for the most, it reawakens this initial hurt that basically caused us to look for something to help us feel safe in the very first place. And then it can manifest as tremendous guilt, right? And shame as well. It's not an easy thing to acknowledge and admit and accept that you hurt somebody else, that you hurt them in their core. That's not an easy thing. Okay, it is possible. It's also not an easy thing to actively work on repairing that. Not easy, but possible. Okay, possible. There's a few key steps involved that are totally necessary, like your communication has to improve. Your self-awareness has to improve. You have to learn how to regulate your own nervous system so that you will get triggered again, all right? The triggers never go away. The thing that we actually learn is to recognize what might trigger me and then to regulate ourselves, right? Through learning different tools, mainly stuff that I will teach you. In essence, it comes down to regulating your internal energy levels, right? Because we need energy in order to perform cognitively. So all of the skills and the resources that we learn through this process of getting better and getting healthier again, we need a certain amount of energy to remember and stay consciously aware of these things. If our energy drops below a certain level, what do you think is going to happen? There's a thing called a default mode network. And it basically means in a primary level, our nervous system and our brain functionality, it works with its original programming. Okay? So however we were conditioned in our primary years, between the ages 3 to 7, my experience, 3 to 7, then 8, 9, and 10 as well, we revert back to that conditioning, which basically means that all of the things that hurt you, all of those feelings that you've worked so hard to manage and control, all of those things come back. All right, so lifestyle management is a very, very big part of this journey. What impacts does addiction have on both our nervous system, right, and our whole body as an ecosystem, as well as on the other side, our cognitive processing? Now, the reason I'm telling you all of these things, right, is because people often come to me and they go, Marcel, how can I stop? What do I need to do to stop? And this is pretty simple. I tie you up to a chair and I fucking leave you there. I'd leave you on a drip, right, for a week or 2 weeks. Your body still gets enough food and fluids and you just, you stop. But it's actually not that easy. Because if we just stop without understanding the impact that this behavior has on our whole ecosystem, our minds and our body and our nervous system, then it will be much easier to actually go back to it. Right, so the education part is imperative. Actually, it's paramount. Really, it is. The reason for this is because when we go past a certain threshold when it comes to addiction, we become slaves to whatever the substance is that we're abusing. Right, whether it's food or whether it's alcohol or whether it is hard drugs or whether it's pornography or whether it's toxic relationships, in its essence, we become slave to something external of us, meaning that we need that in order to feel okay. Okay, this is what addiction is. We need that in order to feel okay. This has a very specific impact on our nervous system, right? So first of all, from the perceptual point of view, what happens is my body feels it's not safe. But I know if I take some of this, or if I watch some of this, or if I do that, my body will feel safe, right? So from an anatomical and a biochemical point of view, the very first thing that happens is we get some feel-good hormones. Right? We get dopamine, we get serotonin, either for dopamine for the short burst of yippee, right? Everything is cool, or serotonin for a bit more long-term. Yeah. It can motivate us, and we can feel, really cocaine does that for some people. So it's a chemical reaction that actually happens in the body physically. Now this, of course, the reaction, even though these chemicals are produced, many of them in our gut, right? Certain parts of your brain gives the instruction, right? Of, okay, now there's more of this, so this is how I need to feel. Okay, and this is why I used the word slave. Because once we engage in this process, the steps involved are really automatic. It's like pressing a button. You press the button, then this thing happens, then this thing, and it's kind of like this, step-by-step sequence. So we have very little control over it. It is, in fact, really like a slave scenario. The problem with that is, and this is why we call it addiction, because you're addicted to it. You need it to feel better time and time and time again, and you don't realize the damage that it's causing around you. The other side of it is the cognitive processing. Specifically when it comes to the self, right? The self-view, how I view myself. And we're not even talking yet about what we do to other people because of this. This is still just with me, myself, and I. It can have such an intense effect on how we view ourselves. The value we attribute to our life and our ability can be completely contaminated and broken down to nothing. One of the main things when I was drinking is I was eating mints like crazy, right? I always had a mint in my mouth because I was drinking everywhere, but it made me so paranoid, and underneath the paranoia there was this really helpless feeling of, and it's tough to talk about this. I've had this conversation many times, but it's still difficult to talk about it. There was this feeling of, Marcel, you should be able to just stop this. Why can't you just stop this? What kind of a person are you? You know that this is not good, and it's not. And you're stuck in limbo, and that your life can go on for as long as you're doing this. And that made me feel horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And the irony then of that is that this just made me want to drink more. Because remember now, the stages and the effects of the alcohol was that upon consumption, I feel better. That was it. 5 minutes and I will feel totally better. All this guilt would be gone. All the shame would be gone. I'd be calm and clear and all of those things. Obviously, this state didn't last because I never just stopped with one drink. I usually drank until I passed out. So be aware of what might be happening in your mind as well. Okay, and I think really be conscious that this is not going to be an easy thing. So I'm really talking to the partners of the people who might be addicted, right, and who are addicted. The partners that are in this and surrounded by this. That person who is addicted to something, they know that they have a problem. Okay, and they're suffering intensely. They know they have to do something about this. The problem is every time they try, or every time they even think about it, they start to panic. And every time they start to panic, their nervous system goes back to that initial thing that generated this enormous amount of fear inside of them, and that drives them then back to whatever the substance is that makes them feel better. Now, this is not an excuse, okay? That person is causing harm like I said in previous videos, they're damaging you, right? So this is not an excuse. But all I'm saying is, the more pressure you put on them to stop, 9 times out of 10, the more they will consume. Okay, space is necessary in order to evaluate and realize really the impacts of the addiction. And with force and overwhelming situations and circumstances, that does not assist this at all. The next part, what is the damage that being an addict, or I don't really like using the word an addict because it very much kind of just points to one specific area, you know. You use the word addict like in the picture, that because of the media and socialization and everything, pictures, yeah, needle, when this is not necessarily true at all. So for the purpose of this conversation, let's say addicted. Okay. What is the effects that one individual that's addicted to something negatively, that they can't stop, that has a negative influence on their life and the people around them? What is this negative impact and influence on the people around them? Now, note I'm not just talking about partners, okay? The spectrum for this is really 360 degrees. You can draw a radius, right, around the person who is addicted, and every single thing and person, whether it's even sometimes I've seen it animals, right, or any person that gets into this radius will get affected by this. Okay, so it can be partners, it can be parents, it can be children, like my dad's, right, with me and my brother and my sister and my mother. It can be any person who gets into that radius. One of my favorite quotes is by Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. If you like reading, that's it. If you don't have the funds to purchase it, no worries. YouTube Bessel van der Kolk and watch some of his interviews, right? But he said that people who hurt people. This is profound, both in its accuracy as well as in its deep simplicity. Okay, because it really is like that. The people who are addicted to something, they hurt. This hurt makes us blind to anything that's happening around us, totally oblivious. It's this constant state of I don't feel safe. So it brings your consciousness really deep into your body. You know, you only think about yourself. It's a very selfish state, personal experience. But we hurt the people around us because of this, right? We cause an enormous amount of damage to the people around us. Now, I'm not talking about my intention wasn't to. Of course. I'm talking about the reality of the impacts that my behavior as an addict has on the people around me that I love and care for. The people around me that love and care for me. This is such a devastating affliction. Getting a little bit out of the drama, right? And just, this topic is very near to me. Very, very near to me. So I do get a bit animated and excited and sad when I talk to it. And especially now that I'm sharing with you. Yes. We strive to feel safe. Okay, both as an addict, as well as the person who is in a relationship with the addict, or the parent who is the parent of an addict, or the child who is the child of an addict. All of us just want to be safe. Everybody just wants to feel secure and relaxed and calm. Okay, and if we don't manage to maintain a state of relaxation and safety and calmness, then there is something wrong. Okay, so this is the very first sign always that we look for. If we are not able to self-regulate and get back to a state of nervous system safety and security, of relaxation, then there's something wrong. Okay, there's some kind of a deep-seated adaptive behavior that basically constantly, as soon as our bodies experience this feeling, we go into our memory. Our memory tells us, yeah, Marcel, do you remember in the past when you felt like this? Oh, yeah, no. Just do that thing again, Do that thing again and you'll feel better. Now, this can be an action, a behavior, a consumption. It can be in anything, right? But in essence, this is really a very subconscious process. So a part of dealing with addiction for both the user, the addict, as well as the partner, parents, child, first and foremost is physical safety, right? You have to make sure that you're safe. Really, really important. Okay, because if you're in physical danger, then you really can't do anything. If you're safe, and this is really just kind of a cognitive, emotional struggle, it hasn't come to physical violence, and like it is a case of, okay, yeah, but it's like this is destroying me. It's making me feel horrible and it's making me feel worthless. Both the addicts, the person who's addicted and the person who's in the environment. Once these things start happening then we come to a point where we absolutely have to realize that I'm doing the same thing. Now I'm talking for both. Remember, the person who's addicted as well as the person experiencing this. For the person who's addicted, I'm doing the same thing, so I'm getting the same result. All right, pretty straightforward. But because I'm doing the same thing and I'm getting the same result, yes, I'm hurting people. But if I keep doing this, at least sometimes I get to feel safe. This is how real that struggle is, right? For the person around them then, same question. How long am I going to keep doing the same thing? How long am I going to keep fighting with them? How long am I going to keep telling them they have to, and if they don't, then I'm going to do this, this, and this, ultimatums? How long am I going to keep doing the same thing, right? And getting the same results? This is really important. Because if you keep doing the same thing and you keep getting the same results, then obviously it's not working. It's just generating more overwhelm, more pressure, more frustration, more anxiety, and more of the same for both people involved, right? Just on an exponential impact. This is something I've been struggling with intensely and intimately and directly and personally in my own life. And I deal with a lot of people that also struggle with this. So if this resonates with you, the reason I'm starting to make these and tell my story with such, I don't know what it is, but the reason I'm being so open with you is because I want to help you. Okay, I want to help you. So what I would like to do is, I would like your point of view, right? I would like your thoughts to tell me what exactly is it that you're dealing with? What is the effect that this has had on your life? So that I can use that information and make a course, design a course for you. Something that is self-study with a ton of homework. Maybe with a group call as well, once a week for a while. But something that you can do yourself to take that control, to start working on this, okay? Either for you as the person who is in the middle, as the addicted individual, or for the people who are in their presence, the people who are in the lives of the addicted people. I want to help. I understand how this shit destroys lives. And it does. But there is another side. You can get through this. You can. I see it over and over again. One step at a time. One step at a time. I believe in you. Take care.